Hello, everybody, and welcome to Flight Simulation Association's webinar on virtual reality. My name is Evan. I'm the co-founder of Flight Simulation Association and the host of today's live presentation. Now, we're about 9 minutes away. You can see the counter up on the screen there above me from actually jumping over to our panel and getting into our content. But before we jump in, I wanted to give you the very first opportunity as people are flowing in here to enter our contest. As you may know, today we are giving away not one, but two Pimax virtual reality headsets, a Crystal when it comes out, and an 8KX. And if you want to win either one of those headsets, now is your first opportunity to enter over at flightsimassociation.com/contest. You're going to see a screen that looks, well, just like this one. And in order to enter the contest, pretty straightforward. Put in your name, put in your email address. Let us know what you want us to call you if you win. Remember, you'll be on stream with a couple hundred people watching, so if you want to use a handle, a username, something like that, that would be a good thing to enter in there. You've got to do some math. I'm not going to try and do that live on stream, of course. And then you can click the Enter Giveaway button and get started. Once you've actually entered the giveaway, there are some additional chances to win as well. You can subscribe to our weekly newsletter. You get an extra 5 points. You can become an FSA First Officer for free or a captain. And of course, if you're already an FSA member or a captain, definitely go ahead and click those options because when you're logged into the website, you'll get the credit for being part of our association. The other thing that's available today is everyone who's watching has the opportunity to get a discount code from Pimax. You don't have to be a Flight Sim Association member for that. All you need to do is click on this option right here to join Pimax's mailing list, and you get an extra 5 entries. Plus, of course, you get that discount code emailed to you once we are wrapped up. Like I said, we'll be live with the panel here in just a couple minutes, so as folks are flowing on in, say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to go on and enter that contest. And as we're just waiting here, we wanted to also introduce Robin, the CEO, founder of Pimax. Robin couldn't be with us today for this live presentation, but they've sent over a nice video that talks a little bit more about Pimax and about this collaboration. So I'm going to play that video for you, and we'll be back on with the panel here in about 7.5 minutes. Stay with us. We'll talk to you here in just a couple minutes. And now, here's Robin.
Hello everyone, my name is Robin Wong and I'm the founder of Pimax. Because I've been busy with our new product launches recently, I'm sorry I can't participate in this webinar in person. So I have recorded this video to express my support and gratitude for this invitation and all the great work that the association does to assist the user in discovering the joys for flight simulation. First of all, I would like to thank Evan for curating this webinar, and I would like to thank all of guests who came to the webinar today and contributed their many great ideas. As a VR manufacturer established for 7 years, Pimax is committed to a customer-first philosophy and have been fully dedicated to development of groundbreaking high-end VR products for our flight sim enthusiasts. I have always believed that human beings can live in multi-dimensional space. We are building a multi-dimensional world for the people where human beings can switch freely between different dimensions of space, enjoy adventure with their friends, and learn about the world in ways that were not possible before. Flight simulators provide a place where enthusiasts can fly freely and expand their knowledge of the world, both real locations and those that only exist in our imagination. As Martin has explained, the 200 field of view of our AKX, along with their high resolution, enable users to experience simulations that in the past only could be found in science fiction. Even more exciting is our upcoming third generation handsets, like Pimax Crystal and Pimax 12K QLED, which are designed to take flight sim visual fidelity to a new level and of high resolution wireless for the very first time. As we progress towards the future, Together with amazing feedback from simulator, enthusiasts everywhere is our hope that this creates the most compelling and realistic experience available. The knowledge the flight simulator community has already provided us, the development of those platforms can be underestimated and was fundamental to the success we have today. We at Pimax offer all of you our sincere thanks, and we look forward to building great immersive experience together. Finally, I would like to thank Flight Simulation Association for developing and organizing valuable events like this one. I wish you all the best. Thank you. See you next time.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Virtual Reality New Horizons in Flight Simulation. My name is Evan. I'm the co founder of Flight Simulation Association and your host of today's live presentation. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you're watching in the world. I know we've got people watching on YouTube, Facebook Live, and here with us on Flight Simulation Association. So it's a pleasure to have you all with us today. We're talking all about virtual reality. And as you may know, virtual reality is becoming bigger and bigger in the home flight simulation space. We did a survey with Navigraph back at the end of last year. 24,000 flight simmers responded, and of them, 15% are already using virtual reality. And that number has been going up every single year. So the question is it time for you to make that switch? And then we may have people on the webinar today who are experts in VR but know nothing about flight sim. We may have people on the webinar today who are experts in flight sim, know nothing about VR, and everything in between. So we'll do our best to give you a nice overview of what virtual reality is, how it works with our favorite flight simulation platforms, and some tips and tricks for using VR and getting the most out of it. Before I hand things off to the panel, though, we promised a giveaway, and you can enter that giveaway right now at flightsimassociation.com/contest. You can also use the QR code and scan that on the screen. We are giving away a Pimax Crystal when that comes out here in the next little while, and a Pimax Vision 8KX. So 2 lucky winners will get those delivered right to their homes. And you can enter that contest over at flightsimassociation.com/contest. If you missed the link, don't worry about it because we will most certainly be presenting that link to you again and again. Now, we're Flight Simulation Association. If you haven't heard of us, our mission is to help make it easier for people to get into home flight simulation. Whether you're a pilot and you want to use it for training, or you're an enthusiast and you just want to learn how to do it a little bit more seriously. We have flight simmers, we have industry developers, pilots, and everyone else part of our association. And one of the main things we do, in addition to webinars like this one and the free resources and guides on our website, is we organize this thing called Flight Sim Expo. Our next show is coming up on June 23rd to 25th over in Houston, and it is North America's biggest dedicated flight simulation conference for enthusiasts and pilots. You can come on out and join us by visiting flightsimexpo.com. You'll see presentations done kind of like this one, except we're actually in person on a stage. There's me back in Orlando in 2019, so yes, I do actually stand up and I have legs. There's more to me than just what you see right here. And in addition to that, we've also got a big exhibit hall where you can try out the latest in home flight simulation hardware, including, of course, VR headsets, joysticks, flight controls, and a whole lot more. So you can find information on our show there at flightsimexpo.com and on the association at flightsimassociation.com. We'd love for you to join us, become a free member, and take advantage of all the website has to offer. And as we go ahead and get started, I'll be handing things over to the panel in just a moment. Friendly reminder to go on into that contest at flightsimassociation.com/contest. I will be back with you to announce the winners and, of course, to answer all of your questions once we've done our first portion with the live presentation. I want to thank Sky Blue Radio for helping to cover this, along with Blue Games, who's streaming us live on YouTube. Hello to everyone there, to the Pimax YouTube channel, and of course to all of our FSA members. Make sure you say hello wherever you're watching in the chat, and I'll be back to chat right back to you in just a moment. And I'll thank as well Pimax for helping us put this webinar on. This really was actually their idea for a collaboration, and what's really exciting to us is that they're actually here with us in the flight simulation community. We usually find that a lot of the big VR companies, they're never at our shows. They're never engaging with us as flight simmers. So we're really fortunate to have the experts, the creators of VR, with us here today on today's live presentation. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand things over to Martin from Pimax, and he'll be joined by Wojciech from InFlight, Blue Games, and Ben from Sim Your Plane to have a wonderful discussion on virtual reality. I'll be back in about 45 minutes with some prizes and to answer your questions. But for now, let me hand things over to Martin and the panel. So Martin, over to you.
Thank you, Ivan. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's also an honor to be invited by you and the Flight Simulation Association to this webinar. Now, first, I think let's do a quick round of introductions so the audience gets to know us, all of us, who we are, what we're working with, and also how we relate ourselves to flight simulation. So, Wojciech, would you mind starting maybe?
Hello, yes. My name is Wojciech Kotulski. I am from Poland. I am director of InFlight. At InFlight, we produce aerobatic flight simulators. And also, I am an aerobatic pilot. I fly competitions. And yes, I love VRs. We are starting to use them in our simulators.
Wow, a real life pilot. Wow, interesting. Thank you, Wojciech. How about you, Ben?
Yeah, so my name is Ben Myrick. I'm from South Carolina, USA. My company is Sim Your Plane. What we focus on primarily is custom hardware that is a kit that you can take any aircraft and transform any aircraft into a simulator, strictly VR based. And then the other side of the business, the larger side of the business really, is custom hardware solutions as well as custom software solutions for commercial partners that use X-planes. So companies like Bridger Aerospace that do big water bombers, or people that fly a helicopter with an aerial saw. So we do all the custom software and the coding and the plug-in development for that.
Wow, impressive. So we have two experts here, at least two experts. How about you, Blue?
What's going on, beautiful people? My name is Blue Games, YouTube content creator on Twitch, Instagram, and on TikTok. I'm not an aerobatic pilot, but I have pulled a few G's, about 4 on my phone. My internet, that's about it. But other than that, love aviation. I only have one actual real world hour in flying an aircraft. So looking to become a pilot soon, but right now enjoying flight simulation and love flying in VR as well, which we're going to talk a lot more about later. So yeah.
Well, 1 hour of flight training is 1 hour more than I've ever done. So it's impressive either way. Thank you guys for the lovely presentations. Well, meanwhile, what you see on the screen right now is a VR flight performance made by Steve, also called VR Flight Sim Guy. Steve is a well-known VR content creator and YouTuber. Actually, Steve was supposed to join us here tonight, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. But at least he made a video for us here demonstrating VR flight simulation, which we highly appreciate, of course. Now, VR Flight Sim Guy is a YouTube channel dedicated for VR flight simulation, of course. And I would just recommend you personally, if you are into that kind of stuff, and if you want to learn everything about it, all the existing flight simulators, get hints and tips, how to optimize your setup for VR, all the plugins, and also some reviews of the latest and best VR headsets, please check out VR Flight Sim Guy on YouTube. There's tons of educational content out there. So maybe I should introduce myself as well. My name is Martin. I'm based in Sweden. I have a computer science engineer background, and I've been working with Pimax for almost 4 years now. So yes, I am a VR enthusiast, and I'm a completely addicted VR flight sim enthusiast. Now, I mentioned Pimax. Some of you may not have still recognized the name or the brand. Pimax is a VR company or a VR headset manufacturer and vendor. What I really appreciate about Pimax, and actually why I started to work for Pimax in the first place, was because the company loves to innovate and push the VR technology forward. And that's something I really appreciate. For reference, Pimax was the first brand offering a consumer-grade VR headset with an ultra-wide field of view and a high-resolution 4K per eye panel, or 2 of these actually. That's a huge leap in VR technology, and believe it or not, yet today there is nothing like that on the market for us consumers or VR enthusiasts and flight sim enthusiasts. So that's why, since I am a passionate tech geek, so to say, I would say working with Pimax is a blast for me, and especially seeing the development year after year, how VR evolves. So today I'm here with you, all of you here, and I'm going to share my thoughts about VR flight simulation, especially using high-end VR headsets, such as Pimax and other brands, of course. There are many other brands out there. I'll tell you how it works, how it feels, what's the benefits of it, and what you can expect from VR technology as a whole, especially when you're moving from the traditional flight simulation on a PC monitor or a projector or something that you're using currently. Now, I'll also give you some tips and hints, my personal best tips along the way, how you can improve the flight sim experience. And together we will also discuss the topics about related problems or problems related to VR, such as motion sickness, nausea, and stuff like that, and how you can prevent that from happening, among other things, of course. Now, luckily, as you just saw, I have some great company here tonight together with Ivan, Wojciech, Ben, and also Blue Games. And Blue Games, as I said, as we already mentioned, is a content creator himself with a YouTube channel called Blue Games. And so during the presentation here, we will, meanwhile I'm presenting the stuff on screen, we'll also discuss the topics together to make the discussion more interesting to you guys out there watching this. Now, you may want to know I'm not a pilot, as I said, and I would say my level of experience in flight sims is not even close, probably not even close to the experience you have guys out there, especially you pilots and students. But I started exploring flight simulations already back in the times of Microsoft Flight Simulator 95 and 98. That's like 27 years ago or something. And I've always been fascinated about aviation. And then obviously about flight simulation, which is the closest thing I will ever get to when it comes to flying an aircraft, right? So to me, the complexity of it, it's just mind-blowing how it works, you know, VFR, IFR, ILS approaches and landings, all that stuff. It's so addictive to learn and to master all these things. And anyway, throughout the years that I've been flying with various flight simulators, I've seen the flight simulators, the applications themselves to evolve dramatically, not only graphically, but also in terms of complexity, the realism, the physics, airplane models, all of that. And there's one thing, that's the problem. There's one thing that's always been missing to me. I always felt that those flight simulators, no matter how great they're looking, no matter how realistic they get, I've always been missing that feeling. And that feeling could be described as immersion. Now, I could bounce this question to my colleagues over here sitting next to me. Ben, how would you describe VR immersion? What was your first feeling when you tested flying a flight simulator in VR?
Oh man, so I would say my first experience was a very rather primitive setup, I would say, because this is back before Oculus was really a thing. So the first experience I had was with a phone in this Google Cardboard box with this little magnet button thing on the side. Right. And just the ability to put it on and you could look left, look right, and you can like, oh wow, like I turn my head, like I see something there. And so I'm amazed in where the technology has gone from this primitive little setup on a cardboard box in your phone to the immersion that we have, like from the Pimax, you know, you have 200 degrees a field of view. So the immersion there is really the big thing that you cannot describe without trying. I've done, you know, talks with people before about VR, and you can't explain it. We're all on this webinar on a 2D screen and people go, oh, cool, it's immersive. But once you put it on, then it just has a light bulb click moment and you go, oh, that's what they mean when they say it's immersive.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. How about you, Blue? How would you describe the difference between a PC monitor setup and a VR headset?
I mean, it's seriously nothing like it. I mean, I've tried the head tracking software. I've done just a 2D screen. I've tried using my mouse to look around, and it really made a massive difference when it came to doing things like aerobatics or things like flying fighter jets in DCS world. I mean, obviously it makes a big difference in any environment, but when it comes to anything where you need to have, you know, situational awareness of what's going on, which is basically anytime you're in an aircraft, it's makes a massive difference. And just being in it and being able to, like you said, look around, like, okay. And also it's just like, for me, the biggest thing for me when I got into VR was the depth perception. Is like, you can actually tell how high you are. Like 2,000 feet, 4,000 feet actually feels like 4,000 feet. Like your brain is being tricked, right? Like VR is tricking your brain into thinking you're actually up here. You even, like, if you're a kind of person who's scared of heights and you get in VR and you get up high, you're gonna, like, you know, you're gonna shiver a little bit. You'll get some cold sweats. It's legit. Like it really tricks your brain into thinking you are actually there. And when you get out of VR, you're like, you know, it's kind of like, you know, if you're in a plane for a long time or you're on a boat for a long time, you finally step on solid ground. Like, it's kind of how it feels when you get out of VR. So my experience has been amazing. My first experience was unforgettable. I think it was with X-Plane, I believe, and being able to look around and see everything in the cockpit, everything 1-to-1 scale. And I'm like, wow, like this is I thought a Cessna 172 was bigger than this, you know? You know, because like when you're on a 2D screen, everything looks massive. I'm not sure you ever noticed that, but like when you have this your whole cockpit set up on a 2D screen, you know, it's like 4K. You got these massive monitors. Then when you get into a real aircraft in real life, you're like, all right, it's like this small, and VR kind of translates that as well.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that, especially the 3D depth perception, which also is one of the first topics we're going to touch in a moment here. But first, Wojciech, how would you describe your first experience in VR? And I also heard that you would never go back to monitor flight simulation.
Well, my approach was a little bit different because I was not testing, let's say, screens or different headsets. I was just looking for the solution to find some way to train the aerobatics. And when I started the competition flying, I noticed that I have to train more and more and more. And then I found out that I have to, or I want to prepare some simulator for the trainings. And then I realized that the only way that I can see what I see in the real plane is to use the VRs. The screens was not an option because aerobatic pilots, we look all around. We very rarely look ahead. We just look on the wing or above. We observe the plane and the horizon. So our head is moving all time. And there was no question that we need a solution so we can make the visualization like in the real plane. And only VR headsets can give us this. And of course, I started to test different headsets, and then I found out that with all of them there is a problem because all of them they are around 100 degrees field of view. So
Right.
for aerobatics, it's not also good. So then I found out the Pimax, which is almost, or it is wide as the natural view with the peripheral vision. And that was it. Yes, it was question of how to do it, and the solution came with Pimax.
Yeah, well, I think we can all agree that total immersion is one of those unique things that virtual reality offers. Now, shortly, I can just tell you that my first headset was an HTC Vive back in 2016, and I purchased this, and I just loved it. You know, despite all the flaws, the limitations, the low resolution, the narrow field of view, the lack of clarity also, which was like terrible if you look back into it. But back then, it was amazing still. Now, then, a lot of things has happened to the VR technology ever since then, especially the past 4 years. And now today, 2022, sorry, I can personally assure you that VR has completely changed flight simulation. That's something I can stand behind. And that's also all thanks to, in my opinion, 6 specific reasons or factors, which I'm listing on the first page of the presentation here, of how VR changed flight simulation. And those topics we're going to discuss a little bit more in depth are the 3D depth perception, of course, or the 3D stereoscopic view, the wider field of view, which now is, of course, available in Pimax mainly. And then also we have the high resolution. I mean, the resolutions has been massively increasing with the headsets just in a matter of a few years. Then the immersion factor, we can go deeper into that part as well. The interaction, all the ways you can interact in VR, which is just amazing compared to the traditional way of doing flight simulation. And also the educational part, how great of an educational utility this could be, or is already in many corporations and even in military grade defense departments and such, for pilots, for training and stuff like that. So the first thing is the 3D depth perception. Now, that's made by the 3D stereoscopic view. So there are 2 images rendered, and they're different images which are aligned to the vision of your eye, whatever. That's my simple explanation of it. So you basically see a 3D depth just like in real life. Although I would say that the 3D depth perception is even more enhanced than it is in real life, because you really can tell the difference between like you and the cockpit and what's happening outside of the cockpit and so on. So as you said, Blue, the sensation of height and altitude is just, I think it's one of the most impactful, or one of those things that has the most impact to people going over to VR headsets, that you can actually see the height of how high you're flying, especially when you're doing low altitude flights. It just gives you that real world scale, that feeling of that you're sitting in that cockpit instead of looking at a cockpit on a screen. Also, there are a lot of things such as easier way to estimate distances thanks to the 3D depth perception. Now, I've always had this problem. I don't know about you guys, but I always had this problem, for instance, doing VFR approaches and landings on the monitor. I never really could estimate the distance between my plane and the landing strip. And I think that completely changed with VR. I would say I'm not an expert in flight simulation in any way. I am an enthusiast, but I'm not an expert. I would say it's so much easier to just perform a landing, even with a Boeing 767 or whatever, just because of the way you're seeing the world around you and the depth, the distance estimations and all that. So 3D depth perception is basically the natural feeling of being there in that surrounding, being surrounded, and just more of a natural way of looking at things, just like we do in real life. Now, also, there is one more thing, and that was, or maybe we just skipped that. Well, let's just go over to the next topic. I don't know, guys, do you want to fill in something else about the 3D depth perception or the stereoscopic view? Wojciech, maybe?
I would say, where you're landing the aerobatic aircraft, you don't look ahead. You just have to look a little bit side. And I cannot imagine how to do the landing with the simulation with the PC screen. Because you have to have this depth of feeling. So the VR headsets, yes, this is the right tool to have this feeling, how far from the ground you are. And because, if you would look just ahead, you don't see anything. So it is critical.
Right.
So from my point of view, this what you mentioned, the depth of view is one of the critical issues that allows pilots to fly correctly and closer to the reality.
Yeah, and even for beginners, I would say, Blue, you touched that topic. It was so funny you actually mentioned that about the cockpit size of the Cessna 172. I had exactly the same feeling. I never thought that the cockpit of the Cessna was so narrow and small and tiny. It's just like claustrophobic almost in VR compared to what you think it is when you see it on pictures on video. That was just amazing example of how 3D perception does that.
I was thinking too, as well as, I'm not sure how many people do formation flying in their various simulators, but having that 3D depth perception actually helps with that as well. It's same with air-to-air feeling. If you're just trying to, because it's a feeling, you don't have to squint your eyes at a 2D screen. Like, all right, am I getting closer? Am I getting closer? Like that sense, that closing distance that you get to another object, whether it be, again, like you said, like landing, it's that closing distance. You can actually sense that in VR because of that 3D depth perception.
Sure, I totally agree. Now, let's jump into the next. Oh, sorry.
Okay. No, so I was going to say, so Wojciech, I think you touched on it with flying aerobatic airplanes. They have a glide ratio of a brick. Throw the brick out the window, that's where your glide ratio is. You need to look here, and there's where you're going to come in. And you just can't do that effectively with a hat switch. Most people have a hat switch that they have a quick glance or a quick view, but the glance is 45 degrees and you only need 10 degrees, and the next time you need 50 degrees. So you just don't have that. And then the depth perception also doesn't matter so much for me, the forward view, because you don't get that with the 2D screen, but it's also your surroundings. You're coming into land and say you're coming in a 45 to a downwind, and I want to then judge my altitude. So I'm looking at my window. I know my rough altitude I need to be. I'm looking for my traffic on my crosswind. I'm looking for my traffic, everywhere in the pattern. So it's more so the surrounding environments that's going to give me my depth perception than more so just, is it getting closer or getting further away? I'm using my surrounding environment to give my depth perception as well.
Right.
That a 2D screen doesn't just offer you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I apologize for the slides here. I happened to jump into the next topic before we were even finished. So I was already at the wide field of it because I think it's so exciting topic, the next one. So yes, let's move on to the field of view. Now, as I said earlier, I started with headsets which had roughly like 90 or 100 degrees field of view, and I always felt like there was a tunnel vision, what I experienced. It felt a little bit claustrophobic in the beginning. Of course, you get used to that. But what I was lacking the most was the real presence or the real feeling of actually being there. When you have those blinders on the side, what do you think, guys? How would you have all of you? First of all, have all of you tested wide field of view VR so far?
I have not. No.
So I'll jump in here and say, from a commercial application, the wide field of view for one of my customers was an absolute requirement. So we had a customer that is flying a Hughes 500 helicopter, and the helicopter has an aerial saw underneath. So you can imagine 100 foot below the helicopter, there's 10 saw blades. So whoever's seen James Bond, when the James Bond car gets cut in half, it's basically one of those.
Yeah.
And what happens is the pilot is hanging out of the door and staring at the ground, watching the saw blades cut. What happens, however, is they can't lean back into the aircraft, look at the gauges, make sure the engine gauges are fine, and lean back out. You can't be jumping back and forth. So the company actually has remote door gauges. So there's 2 remote door gauges, one for the engine torque and one for the ITT, that are mounted right inside the door frame. And so what happens in the simulator, they wanted to have those gauges there. And so what we did is we modeled those gauges at the door. Well, staring at the ground, if you have a really narrow field of view VR goggle, you can't just glance to your left or glance to your right and see those door gauges, because again, you're in a VR goggle like this. And so that glance ability, you're looking at that screen door, or you're looking at that edge. And so having a wide field of view from that application it adds the immersion, and it basically gives you the realistic immersion, because the real aircraft, you're hanging out the door, flying the helicopter, and you're just glancing just quickly in the corner of your eye to look at the gauges before glancing back. You're not having to move your head. And again, that's a really niche, application. But again, that little bit of immersion that you're moving when in the real airplane you're not going to be moving is a break of immersion. So if you can just glance the same way you would do in the real thing, that immersion just becomes all that more realistic, because that's exactly the type of motion you're going to do in the real thing.
Indeed. And Wojciech, you are using the wide field of view quite a lot. I mean, in your types of flying. Explain more about that. I know we've discussed that before, and I want to hear it again.
Yeah. Well, for aerobatic pilot, like I described before, it's very critical to look around. When we do the maneuvers like hesitation rolls, for instance, we do the line up and the hesitation roll. We always observe the ground, and we look on the tail to see the position with the ground objects. And when I tried several VR headsets which had a field of view around 100 degrees, I was missing it. And it is one of the critical things. I have to have this peripheral view. So the same when I do the level flight and I do the roll, the barrels, and I do also the hesitation rolls, I have to see the horizon. So the wide field of view is very critical. The normal VR headsets, it reminds me situation when I pull G's. When I do the aerobatic flight and I pull G's, I start to have the tunnel vision. So the normal headsets, it would be like I would fly all time high G's. I love high G's, but not all time. It would be boring. So for me, the option is the natural option is only to have this wide field of view, and for aerobatic flying, this is very critical.
Yeah, I can imagine. A lot of people are just taking the wide peripheral vision for granted, I would say, because there's so much more into it. then it doesn't just like fill out your view, but it also adds a lot into your senses, like the increase of sense of speed. I would say a wide field of view adds so much more to the sense of speed, at least in my opinion. When I'm flying, when I'm doing some racing simulators, or even like normal games, running around in VR, it just feels like I'm so faster, more like realistically faster with a wide field of view, because everything moves. That's the natural way of when you're driving a car, for instance. You see the stuff just fly by you, the trees and the roads and all the other cars and stuff. That's something you miss with a narrow field of view, and that specifically I think it's one of the big advantages of wide field of view, to actually get that sense of speed while flying or racing or stuff like that. So I think, again, I think we all agree that it gives a more immersive experience overall with that wide field of view. It's not a must. I'm not saying it's a must, of course, but one thing's for sure. After all the events I've done, all these CES exhibitions and all the stuff around the world, I know for one thing that people who've tried VR or maybe purchased a Pimax headset, a wide field of view headset, they tend to never go back to the narrow field of view, which tells quite a lot, I would say.
I believe that for sure. I was looking at the video right now, like, man, that's pretty freaking nice. I mean, I didn't really say my piece here about the FOV because I haven't tried the wide FOV yet. But in the headsets that I've had in the past, the best way I can compare it or I can explain it is like wearing one of those like racing helmets where it like blocks your vision right here. You can only really see like this much. And that's kind of what it feels like in my my VR headset now, not the Pimax, but the one that I have. So, but I'm like, I can see how big of a difference I can make when it comes to, sense of speed, just like you said, or even, as I said earlier, situational awareness, being able to kind of be able to glance left, glance left or right without having to move your head as much. You know what I mean? So I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, a wide field of view, to project a wide field of view in a VR headset, it's quite an advanced and sophisticated technology. And it's not only Pimax doing these things. There are other brands like Xtal as such, but these companies are doing that for corporate use, for big for military use and stuff like that. Those simulators cost like $8,000 or even more. And I'm a little bit personally, and I'm not talking as a Pimax employee here, but just personally, I'm just surprised that we haven't seen more wide field of view headsets on the market yet. I think it's a good time to actually adapt that so it becomes like a mainstream thing, at least within VR. There's just so many benefits into it, but there's also a difficulty. As I said, it's not easy to make those the view is so wide, and one of the main reasons is the high resolution. I mean, the wider field of view you have, the higher resolution is preferred, because you have to spread those pixels, I mean the amount of pixels around the entire area you're looking at. So today, as of today, high resolution is now more important than ever, I would say, especially in the flight simulation. If you're running a game on a flight simulator on a monitor, whether you're running it in 1440p or 4K, it might add some more sharpness, but it's not going to be a night and day difference. In VR, on the other hand, as soon as you go with a high resolution, all of a sudden you see the gauges, you see the panels, the checklists, you can read stuff without leaning forward and trying hard to see what altitude you're at, even stuff like that. The resolution is pretty important these days on the VR headsets, and I think in a couple of years from now we're going to see some massive increase in the resolutions already very soon, also coming from Pimax already at this.
No, I was gonna say, I think I'm a perfect example. I think this is probably why you guys have me here. I bet, right? Because I'm the one who doesn't have the Pimax. I'm the one that doesn't have the Pimax. That's one of my biggest complaints personally when it comes to VR, and I've even told my community this is this exact issue, the resolution, especially when it comes to flight simming, especially when it comes to IFR flight simming. I mean, you can go out there and you can fly around and look at some beautiful trees and clouds, and it looks great in pretty much any headset. But when it comes down, you gotta want to actually fly a flight plan and look at gauges and things like that. a lot of the headsets that are out there is a struggle because you can't read anything. All the small text is just too hard to see. You got to look, you got to move real close to see it, or sometimes which is impossible, honestly. To see it. Some simulators have a way to like zoom in with your controller and look closer to things, but that's, it doesn't work. And so again, this is one of my biggest issues with my current headset. And to see that you guys are working in this area is a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think that the step was just massive, going for 4K per eye from the previous headsets, and I think this is just going to evolve through time. Ben, sorry, I interrupted you. I think.
No, it's fine. No, I was going to say it's interesting because you segued, I think, really perfectly from the field of view and then to the resolution. Because I think right now, what I've noticed in the industry, there is really kind of a split. Either you get really high field of view, but your resolution is okay, or I shouldn't say okay. It's good, but it's not that picture perfect human eye clarity. And and for me, if I can have my cake and eat it too, I would mix those two. I would have my human eye clarity headset with human eye clarity resolution combined with the field of view. And right now, both of those are paralleling essentially in the VR headset world, and eventually they're going to meet. It's just a matter of time. Every technology we have in VR, some VR headsets when we first got, they weren't standalone head tracking, so you had to have an external tracker. Now we have internal cameras that do it. So the same thing, we're kind of mixing all these paths, and so that field of view and resolution is converging, and it's just a matter of time. One thing that I think I've seen that is kind of essentially made people happy enough for now is that the industry that focuses on extremely high clarity, they say, well, we're just going to focus and make it perfect for human eye resolution, realizing that we're going to look to it like this. Or we're going to say, we're going to make it really, really wide, and it's going to be maybe not perfect human eye clarity, but it's going to be really, really wide. And so both of those have that niche market, and both of those have the market that is a big market. And so both of those headset styles are out there. And my hope is that they converge, because I've seen, in my industry that I'm working in, I've had people that use the Pimax, with the wide field of view, and they say, oh man, I love that. This is perfect for me. And then we give them, the Vario XR3, and they go, I don't like this as much. Like, I really like that one. And then the next guy, he does the exact opposite. He says, oh man, I love the Vario, and I don't like that Pimax. It just doesn't work. And so each person has their own little unique, likes and wants. But I really feel like when both of those paths meet, when the field of view and the human eye clarity meet, then we're really working towards, the ultimate headset.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of personal taste, actually. For me, I mean, personally, I like the 8KX because it's a good mix between a good balance between a wide field of view and a high resolution, even though it might not be industry leading resolution, but still it gives you a little bit of both. So it's still a high resolution, so to say, not the highest, but it still offers that resolution across the entire 170 degrees of field of view. But I mean,
and
of course,
it's a headset. Go ahead, sorry.
No. I was just about to squeeze in that's why we're working on different models right now for the next generation, which will kind of one of them will be more like traditional field of view, which is the crystal, and the next one will be the 12K, which is even wider field of view that offers 6K per eye, which will dramatically increase the resolution compared to the Pimax 8KX, for instance. So go on, Ben.
No, and I was going to say, what happens is you also get, I'm glad there are, for example, the Pimax, it's a headset that you can install and run on a computer that you can, commercially build and manufacture. A lot of times you go to, something like the Vario, where it's got great clarity and it has these great lenses, but the problem is you have to have a supercomputer to run it. And so even though it has that type technology, do you have the computing power to be able to generate that technology? I've seen people in my industry where they say, wow, this HP reverb looks like I'm looking through Microsoft Flight Simulator 95, and it's like, well, what kind of computer are you on? Well, there's your problem. There's your bottleneck.
Yeah.
You know, don't blame the headset because of your computer. And so that balance from 4K also comes down to what you can actually compute.
Yeah. And apart from the resolution itself, also the lenses plays a big role here. I mean, a good lens, an optimal lens is going to give you a bigger sweet spot area, which is the sharp part of the viewable image, the center part, which is fully sharp. And also a good lens also improves or eliminates a lot of the problems such as chromatic aberration or CA, distortions, you know, glare it's called, and stuff like that, reflections. So it's about finding a good balance in between all these things. That's what I guess that's what Pimax is trying, and yeah, I hope you're going to be excited about the next generation as well, which is coming like any day now. By the ways, so guys, let's jump into the fourth topic really quickly here, because we already have discussed the immersive part. We already mentioned about the cool thing with the 3D depth perception, the 360-degree freedom, the natural awareness, and all of that stuff. And it makes the entire interaction closer to real life. So I would say that's a really important factor. But there's also two more, and one of them is interaction. I don't know how many of you have you tried hand tracking with in VR at some point. Blue, have you tried that?
I have never tried hand track. I've used the actual, you know, things. I've never tried it. I didn't know. Honestly, I didn't know much about that. That's a thing.
It is becoming a thing, actually. It's coming. The support is growing more and more in all of those simulators.
So you're saying I can just like use my hands and just pretend like in my imagination that I'm touching things, and my computer's like, yeah, all right, you're pulling the joystick back.
Yeah.
Is that how it works?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. You can pull. Yeah, you can pull the yoke. You can push buttons. You can. I mean, turn all the knobs and stuff like that. So you can fully interact with your cockpit with your fingers and hands. Now it's there's no like so to say, like the support is limited. It depends on which simulator you're running. But in some simulators, like the which one was that again? The not the Aerofly FS2, but I'm going to come to that later. Fly Inside, right? That has a native hand tracking support with leap motion, and that also supports the Pimax hand tracking module. So you can basically do everything in the cockpit with your fingers and hands, which is just really cool.
Wow.
Now, the level of interaction is quite broad in VR. You can, of course, use your VR mouse or the mouse, but in VR, you can use your controllers, such as the Valve Index controllers, and then you're pointing, you can, pull the knobs and triggers and all the buttons and stuff with it. So it's going to act like hands in VR. And that you can actually do. I think you could do that in all of these simulators out there right now, including Microsoft Flight Simulator, DCS or Digital Combat Simulator, and the other ones. We're going to go through some of the simulators later. But I know that some people are against that type of interaction. So of course, if you want to do VR flight simulation, you can of course use your yoke, joystick, gamepad, rudders, whatever you prefer, and still you get the same level of immersion as before. I mean, when it comes to interaction, and that's what I think that's a big plus with VR. There's so many ways of interacting. What do you prefer? Are you mostly using a yoke? Is any one of you actually flying with the controllers in VR, or do you prefer to use a joystick or yoke?
I use. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. You decide. Well, sorry.
With our simulator, it's very important to give to aerobatic pilots the feeling. So we do our own control. We do by our own the controllers, where the pilots have exactly the same feeling as they have in the real plane. Yeah. This is very critical for the muscle memory. So they have the geometry of the aerobatic plane, plus they have the forces that can be linear or unlinear, and they depend on the speed. So we are simulating the forces that the pilots have in different kinds of aerobatic planes, because in some planes it's solved differently. So definitely for aerobatic users, they have to have the controllers to train this muscle memory, and this is what we are providing with in-flight.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. Blue, you wanted to say something as well?
No, I was just gonna say that I mainly use joysticks and yokes here in my office to play flight sims. But only time I really use like a VR controller are in games that like support or like kind of like that's kind of like the way it was built to be used. You know what I mean?
Sure,
With
sure.
flight sim, to me, it doesn't feel right to use a controller to try to control a yoke because there is no feeling. You know what I mean? Just like you said, having that muscle memory. Now I know that my hardware that I have here is not exactly how the real plane is, but at least it's a similar size and whatnot. And so just for me, that's just not the way that I run my flight sims. But I do enjoy using the controller on the games that it makes sense to play them on.
Sure. The last topic or the last aspect of the 6 ones we've gone through is yep.
Do you mind if I jump in just real quick?
Sure, Evan.
Yeah. So, Blue, I think you mentioned it's not the and then I said the natural way to control the controls. It's very interesting that you bring that up. So for I don't even want to count how many months now because it's just disappointing. I've been working through trying to figure out how to certify VR for FAA certification. Because FAA certification just on a very, very simple system, where we're talking about a BATD, which is a basic aviation training device. This is a glorified keyboard, it's a glorified monitor, and then just some basic radio switches, and then a yoke, pedals, and a throttle quadrant. Very, very basic. And you have the tactile feel of turning a knob on the radio. And in VR, you don't get that. But then, unless you have this full built system, how do you turn that tactile knob? And then how do you see that knob? Because you're blinded. Well, you can overcome some of that by using, a mixed reality portal. I've done a lot of mixed reality portal stuff, and that's great. It allows you that open immersion of seeing that knob. But then I have to model every single one of those switches, and I have to draw every single one of those switches.
Sure.
Why can't I just take the hand controller and just turn it with a hand controller? And so it's interesting that you mentioned that because, there is that little bit of tactile feel. And, from a certification, like you do need to turn that knob, and that knob has to be there. And at least from the conversations I've had from the certification process, it has to be a physical knob. So I've been told over and over again that the knob that they talk about on their guide to get approval has to be physical. It doesn't say physical, I'll mind you, it doesn't say physical. I've gotten into some heated debates and some good debates to push the envelope, but those knobs need to be physical. And so, the interaction on a flight simulator sometimes is a little bit of a challenge because you don't truly get that immersion feel. And for me, it's almost a break of immersion because all of a sudden I have to, in the use case of, say, an aerobatic airplane, I have to, take my hands off the controls, pick up this hand controller, tune a knob, and then put it down and then go back to the control. So I break that immersion.
I can imagine,
All that being said, I will say I've had so much fun, and I'll be honest with you, I go through these ups and downs and enjoyment of sim because sometimes it's all work, and then I realize, I just want to go enjoy something and fly something I enjoy. I've had so much enjoyment in an app that you can download just from the App Store. It's called Simple Plane, and it's a headset-only app. I have it on my Oculus Quest, and it's hand controls only. And so I can sit on my couch and fly with my hand controls. And it's just this fun, simple thing. And so you get both ends of it. You get that, I need a tactile button. I can't see it. Okay, mixed reality, but that's a lot of expense. But then on the other side of it, you can have a really enjoyable time using just the hand controllers. And then to add to that, the hand tracking, oh man, the technology there is getting better by the day. The ability to, instead of having to have a hand controller there, I can use my hand instead of it. The challenge that I've seen in the industry is it's really dependent not so much on the headset manufacturers. I think the headset manufacturers across the board has done an amazing job of bringing it to the table, but then it's up to a Laminar Research, it's up to an Aerofly, it's up to a DCS, it's up to a Prepare, it's up to Microsoft, it's up to those people to actually make it work.
Yeah,
and there's where
the support.
I've been kind of disappointed in the industry of like, hey, these headset guys are giving you hands, let's do something with it. And I think once we kind of break through that barrier of being able to use the hands instead of the hand controllers themselves, I think it'll be really good.
Yeah, I think that's about to change slowly now. I mean, especially now when people starting to realize how much impact VR makes for the flight simulation in general, and how much it can be used in educational use, which is the last topic of this chapter. I mean, I think the flight simulator developers will prioritize VR a bit more than they have done so far. VR has just been a niche thing until now, but I think it's gonna be the mainstream thing in a couple of years from now. So I have no doubts it's gonna really improve over time. Now, I know we're running out of time a little bit, so we have to get a little bit faster with the topics here. The sixth and last one was the educational part. I don't know, Wojciech, maybe you want to add something because you're doing a lot of training when it comes to educational flights with your aerobic flight maneuvers.
Yeah. Well, the idea of in-flight, the simulator for aerobatic flying is use it for trainings for pilots on the different level, from the beginners where people can train just the simple maneuvers up to very complex sequences where the pilots on advanced or unlimited level, they can train the position in the box, they can train the sequences. Yes, I also experienced, because a couple of weeks ago we did a presentation of our in-flight simulator, and there were people representing different levels, and also there were people that they had the first approach to aerobatics. So very quickly I was able to teach them the basic maneuvers. They were very enthusiastic, and it's very it has a great benefits, because at these times the flight costs are very high. The availability of the planes, like aerobatic planes, is limited. You have to have a good weather. You have to have time. The preparation for aerobatic flights takes a lot of time, and more. As aerobatic pilots, when we do the trainings, we fly twice per day. It makes sense, because there is so huge stress to the body with the high Gs, with the mental preparation, that one flight takes, for instance, 15 minutes, and per day we are doing only 2 flights. It means that the training with the aerobatic planes is very limited. With the simulation, we can train some maneuvers, we can train sequences for hours, we can make them perfect. And this will be a huge benefit to the pilots on all levels, because pilots will be able to train much more than they could do it in the real plane. And this is because the technology is here. We can use the VR headsets, we can use the fast computers. Right now we deliver also the hardware, the platform of the simulator. So yes, it will be a game changer in the aerobatics.
Yeah, it already is a game changer, I think, and the technology is here. And also, if we take it to the next topic here, the support is growing more and more when it comes to flight simulators, the VR support. Currently, basically every single flight simulator has native VR support at this moment. By native, I mean it works out of the box. Basically, it's a built-in support through special APIs. So there are no hacks, really, no workarounds or some kind of fake 3D stuff like we saw a couple of years ago. I think it's amazing that we can actually fly all those simulators in VR today. Now, we're moving to this new topic here, and I want to go quickly through these pages. I don't want to go too detailed into the technical part of it, but all of these simulators are using an API, application programmable interface, and you can either run these games through SteamVR or OpenXR and so on. But there is one application, if you are flying like Microsoft Flight Simulator or Digital Combat Simulator, X-Plane 11 or 12. I don't know if the X-Plane 12 actually has support for it yet, but the OpenXR toolkit, it does. Okay. I think it's
VR support. Yes, they have full VR support on 12.
Oh yeah, it has VR support, but the OpenXR toolkit, it's such a nice toolkit which enhances the resolutions. It can add a lot of things into the simulator, improve the performance and stuff like that. It can add sharpening, foveated rendering. It has eye tracking support already. You can add post-processing, so you get some better colors and hue. You can change that, customize that for your needs. And there's also hand tracking support within that, which I haven't tested yet, but it sounds really promising. So OpenXR Toolkit is really something to deep dive into once any one of you out there watching this, if you're starting up with VR flight simulators. Now, I know we're short of time now, so I'm just going to go a little bit fast through some of the things about VR, which might be a little bit problematic for some people, but there are some solutions and stuff for this. Now, there are three things. One of them is the PC system requirements, which are rather high. Then we have some visual limitations, which we, especially VR vendors, are fighting by improving the panels, the technology itself, and so on. But also there is something called motion sickness and nausea, which we're going to touch the last thing we do. But first, system requirements. Now, this is a deep topic. We're going to not go too deep into this, but all I can say is that if you have any experience with VR flight simulators, you probably know already that it takes some computer power, some more computer power that you're used to if you're running a flight simulator on a VR headset. That is mainly because you're rendering the image to two panels, and they're two different images, not just like a mirror of the cell. They're two different perspectives, so you can output that 3D depth stereoscopic view. And what you see here on the screen right now in the presentation is just my estimations, my personal estimation of what I would say is the minimum and the recommended graphic card processor and the RAM memory and stuff to run the flight simulators in general. I'm not saying a specific flight simulator, because that varies as well. The performance can vary quite a lot in between the simulators. But at least if you have something on the 3000 generation of NVIDIA graphic card, you should be pretty fine at like a 3080, 3090, or preferably a 4090, even the latest generation. And I think that a lot of people get scared by this. Now they see the specifications. For instance, here, the Pimax 8KX specifications is dual 4K panels. And they're thinking like, oh my God, I'm playing this game, simulator on a monitor in 4K, and I get like 80 frames per second with my high-end graphic card. How am I supposed to play it in VR in the same frame rate? Well, of course, that's not possible really, but there are a lot of enhancements, optimizations, and things you could do to improve the performance and the visuals and find a good balance between a good performance and good visuals in VR, which I think is very, very important. I'm not going to read the full list of things here you could do, but there are a lot of technologies these days, like DLSS, which is built into the Microsoft Flight Simulator. We have FSR upscaling by using the OpenXR toolkit. So you're not really running a full resolution, but it's upscaling a lower resolution to a higher resolution, which gives you basically almost the same clarity, but the GPU does not have to work that hard to output those frames per second. And I will jump to the next page here, which basically are a couple of my personal tips and hints. And I would love you guys also to come with some personal tips, if you have any, for improvement of the performance in VR, which I think is a very important topic after all. My best tip, all these you see on the screen here, would be like, don't go ultra all the way. The first thing you do in VR, don't put all the settings to the max and just expect it to work perfectly. And also don't expect it to make such a huge difference, because there are many things such as the level of detail, like LOD sliders for the objects, for the ground scenery and stuff. It doesn't really have to be at the highest max to really look good in VR anyway. That's the beauty of VR. Things look actually pretty amazing, even though you go medium quality. Even low quality will look way better than it does on a PC monitor. What do you think, guys? Ben, I see you're agreeing with me.
Yeah. So no, I'm laughing because it's a matter of, there's been so many times where I'll talk to people and they have this 9060 GTX card from years ago, and they go, "Oh, this is terrible. There's something wrong with the software. My headset's broken." It's like, well, you're using a card from how many years ago? It's just not gonna work.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's the expectation.
Yeah.
So many people, they get on there and they go, "Oh, well, I can run 60 frames per second, no problem." Well, yeah, that's on a single monitor that doesn't move around. You mentioned it really well with the 3D stereographic. But again, that's not just two monitors fixed. That's two monitors fixed 3D, but then also it's moving around. And so your 60 frames per second is going to be, let's say 30, 40, 50 maybe, as soon as you run VR. And so I think a lot of that is the expectation. So I would say definitely lowering it is key. And then that's the only comments I have. And then I have some good tips for VR setup when you get to that step.
Sure. Yeah. And then there's also technologies which Pimax, for instance, are providing, like smart smoothing, which is basically like an advanced motion reprojection. I know all the other VR manufacturers also provide similar methods, which basically makes you run the simulator in half of the frame rate, which is half of the refresh rate of the headset. So if your headset is running in 90 hertz, you only need to run it in 45 frames per second. You can even go as low as 1/3 of the frame rate. So 30 frames per second on a 90 hertz screen, it will still look smooth. There are some downsides to this, by at some point you can see some small artifacts and stuff in the image, but it's still going to provide you a smooth experience. And I think that's one of the most important factors when playing in VR. You want a smooth and stable experience. And one of the last points I have here on the number 6 there is like big fluctuations or big variation in frame rate. That's the worst thing you can do in VR. If the frame rate is jumping between 30 and 90 frames per second, then it's better to settle for like 45 or 50 or something stable frames per second. It's not going to be 100% smooth, but it's going to feel way smoother. But just by either limiting the frame rate, capping it, you can also do that with Pimax headsets, just limit the frame rate to a certain degree, or using the smart smoothing methods to automatically reproject frames, which makes it more smooth. Blue, how are you handling? I mean, what's your best tip for improving the frame rate?
Oh, well, yeah, I was going to say kind of what you said as well, is like, that's one of the first things that was hard for me to understand when I got into VR. And that was the difference between a 2D screen and running 60 FPS there. And you have your settings, you have your level of detail that you're used to on a 2D screen, and you go to VR and you like want to bump up those settings as well. And then obviously then you get stuttering and unstable frames. That's actually what causes, nausea and motion sickness. I've actually had the issue myself where I would bump it up too high, and next thing you know, I'm watching a slideshow in VR, and you know what I mean? And so it's not fun. It's not fun at all. But I agree. I think turning it down was crazy, is that when you turn it down, even though you're lowering the quality per se, when you're in VR, it looks good still. Like, it's hard to explain unless you're actually in VR how a lower level of detail image can look still good, and even sometimes better than what you usually see. So but yeah, my tip would be don't be too crazy with bumping up your settings. Turn them down if you have to. Find smoothness is the most important thing when it comes to working in VR.
I saw a video from a VR flight sim guide, Steve, that I mentioned earlier. It was a while ago. He made a video where he actually talked about this thing. He said, like, even if you turn down the settings to the lowest possible, at least in the Microsoft Flight Simulator, the latest version of it, it's going to look amazing in VR because it's in VR. It just adds so much more than what you're used to see on the monitor. What do you think, Wojciech?
Well, for me, this is very critical. For our application, there is no other choice than VR, so it's no question. With our simulator, we are approaching the pilots. They are not really the game players. They don't have the experience with gaming. They just expect that when they put the VR headsets on the head, they sit in our simulator. They expect that they will feel like in real plane. So we have to have a smooth picture. We have to have good quality, sharp. We have to have the wide field of view. For us, this is just a question of be or not to be. It's not the question of that we want to play the games.
Yeah.
And for our simulators, we are using very powerful computers, and because it must work, and it works, and it works perfectly.
Yeah, I think we can all agree. Sorry,
Martin. I keep interrupting you tonight.
No. Go ahead. I may be just too fast when I'm just jumping into it. Go ahead, please.
No, Wojciech, I was going to ask. So when we were doing Red Bull Air Race in VR, this is obviously back kind of in the VR infancy. One thing that we always did was we just turned everything down to minimum in VR as far as the graphics, because again, you're catering to the pilot, and so they don't care that this tree is animated and it has the leaves flickering. They're focused on using it as a training tool as a pilot. They need to see a horizon, they need to see ahead, and they need to be able to do their rolls, and they need to pick their pivot points. I work with some of the U.S. aerobatic pilots and do some of their training simulations for them as well. And for them, they don't care about scenery. Their scenery, their custom scenery they have for their simulator is simply just a photorealistic map, nothing there, just a photo map, and it has these big solid bars for the ground. And it looks very ugly from a gamer's perspective, but from a training perspective, they're using it for training. And so for them, they would rather run at 90 FPS and have no scenery than run at 30 FPS and have really pretty trees. So
of course,
Martin, back to you on that is kind of what's important? Are you using it from a training perspective, or are you using it to fly up the Hudson corridor in Microsoft Flight Simulator? What are you using it for, and what the VR needs to be adjusted for that application?
That's a great point.
It's a great point, really. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, for me, being an enthusiast, I'm not a real pilot or anything like that. I'm trying to find a balance always. I still wanted things to look great outside, see this, especially in the simulator like Microsoft Flight Simulator, which has all this satellite imagery and all that stuff. You still want to have that outside of your cockpit, but you don't have to overdo it. That's basically, I think that's what we are all trying to say here. So guys, the second thing, one of the problematic issues here, we already touched most of this here. This is basically what VR vendors are trying to do to improve the image quality, the clarity of it, higher resolution panels, wider field of views, and all that stuff, just to improve the visual clarity. Because the conventional wisdom, I would say, is that VR headset clarity and image is just so bad compared to my 4K monitor at home. And I would say it's not really the case anymore. It was like that back in the days with the HTC Vive, Oculus Rift, the first generation of headsets. But already now with the Pimax 8KX, it's really a clear and nice image. It's not, through the window perfect, completely pixel-free image, but it's still good enough for you to see all the gauges, read the text and all that stuff, which is such a big leap in the technology itself. So, but there is one last thing here, which we could just touch it a little bit quickly here, and that is maybe the biggest issue people have, or the biggest thing people fear about VR, and that is the motion sickness and nausea, because there are so many threads on forums, on Reddit, everywhere, like, oh my God, I tried VR and it was terrible. I vomited almost and stuff like that. Yeah, it's crazy how much you can read all about it. And I completely agree. I mean, I don't agree. I completely understand that every one of us is different. It's all individual. But there are ways to actually get around this, and there are ways to prevent that from happening. And this is some of these things I listed in the presentation here. My two best tips is just to take it easy. I would say in the beginning, don't do some crazy stuff, and give it time. First of all, give it time. It's going to take a couple of days, maybe even a week or two, and then it's all going to settle. You're going to get used to that. What do you think, Blue? I remember we discussed this yesterday about motion sickness and nausea. How long did it took for you to get rid of it?
Yeah, my first experience with VR, I got motion sick, which I'd never been motion sick in my life. I've been on cruises, I've been on planes. I mean, I was like, yeah, I'll be fine. It'll be good. And then I got into VR. I can't remember what activity I was doing, but at first day, I mean, I started getting cold sweats. I started getting chills, and I just felt horrible. I had to get out of VR. I was sweating like crazy. And that night I slept early because I just felt bad. I had never felt like that in my life. And somebody was telling me, you got motion sickness. I was like, huh, really? Yeah, I was nauseous and everything. I looked into it, and basically, yeah, like you said, take it easy in the beginning. At first, you may only be able to do maybe a 10-minute, 5-minute session in VR, depending on what the activity is. It's much easier to do activities sitting down, like sitting down type of VR games versus standing up. For me, that's what did it for me, was playing standing up VR games where you have to like walk with a controller and like your actual body's not moving, but you're like you know, because when your mind is first trying VR for the first time, it's like it's tricking it in so many ways, with altitude, with distance, with depth of field, things like that. And then if you then throw in motion of moving your whole body, but you're not actually moving your whole body, your body's like, going on here? You start losing your balance and stuff like that. And so that's how my first experience was. And because of that, I started feeling bad. So even to this day, I have to take it easy when doing like first person shooters or anything that has to do with walking around a field or something like that, because I still get off balance and start to kind of feel a little bit of motion sickness. But when it comes to flying now, you know, after time of building up my, you know, endurance of being able to stay in VR for longer, I can do a full flight if I want to. As long as it's smooth, as long as my frame rate and my clarity and whatnot is clear, like we said in the slides, I can do a full hour, 2 hour flight and stay in VR and be cool. I'd be sitting there, you know, in the A320, just looking out the window, you know. And then, you know, even I also do VR racing as well. And I've done like, you know, long endurance races in a Corvette driving. I mean, you know, I'm talking about turning hard, pulling G's, hitting apexes for like 2 hours straight. So now it feels good. But again, those are sitting activities. But when it comes to more standing stuff, it's still to this day difficult. You got to know your limits. So just take it easy, go slow to time. I know you're excited, you know, to get into VR, but you know, take it easy and take breaks.
And Martin, I think that's a good time. If you don't mind, I'm going to jump in and we'll do a couple of prize giveaways here, and then we'll bring the panel right back and we'll start answering some questions. So panel, you guys are muted. If you want a second to stretch your legs or something like that, feel free. We'll bring you back on. We've got a whole pile of questions, so we'll bring you back on for all those questions here in just a second. But if you need a minute just to breathe, this is a good time to do that. Now, I know we've got a lot of VR experts because you guys are answering and asking some great questions in the chat, and thanks for that. We're going to bring the chat on the screen here in just a moment. But if you're not a VR expert, you're somebody who's like, wow, this just kind of went over my head, we just want to point out, obviously, YouTube is a great resource. We've given you plenty of those. We're also going to work with Pimax to do a nice blog post kind of covering all these points. I'll see if we can get these slides in there for you, and we'll also try to get some recommendations on settings per simulator. So some of those questions that you guys were asking, we'll try and put that all together for you in a nice website page. But the other thing that you can do if you're a Flight Sim Association captain or if you're looking for some help, Ben is one of our consultants that works with us through Flight Sim Coach. He's a flight instructor, and he can actually do one-on-one sessions with you. And if you sign up for our captain membership, which is $3 a month, not only are you helping the association, but you get that session with him totally free. So you could use that for anything, setting up a simulator or flying an approach, but you can also actually sit down with an expert one-on-one and walk through how to set up VR if that's something that you're interested in. And if you want to get in touch with any of the presenters today, send me an email, info@flightsimassociation.com. Drop me a note in Discord, send me a DM, and I can always put you in touch. Ben is in our Discord as well, so you can reach him there. And of course, I can put you in touch with any of the folks that were on the screen today. Now, let me do one of the favorite parts here, and I'll announce our 2 winners of our giveaways, and then we're going to go right back over to the panel and we'll do some Q&A with them. If I announce you as the winner, look for an email. I'll be sending you an email later tonight from info@flightsimoassociation.com. You have exactly 24 hours to respond to that email, and if you don't, I'm picking somebody else, so make sure you pay attention to that. And here we go. Our first winner is Orville. So Orville, if that's you, look for an email from me within the next couple of hours here, and then you've got 24 hours to respond. And our second winner, I'm going to announce right now. Our second winner is Dan John. So Orville and Dan John are 2 winners. Congratulations to both of you. Thank you to everyone who entered our contest. Stay tuned with us because, of course, in future webinars, we will have lots more. But let me go ahead and bring the panel back on here. It looks like everybody's ready to go. So I'm going to bring the panel back on and we'll start answering some of your questions. I'm going to start kind of mostly in the order that they came in. I'll announce the name of the person who asked the question as well. So if you're here and listening, obviously that'll be your question. And I'm going to bring up the chat as well so people can have a look at that. Ben, I see you're in there and answering some questions, so that's wonderful. Thanks for that. And so let's just jump
Sorry, I'm a little
in.
late.
No, that's all good. So Petter from the FSA site is the first question, but lots of people have asked this. When will we be able to order the 12K and the Crystal, Martin?
Okay, so the Crystal launch is happening like any day now. I can't tell you the exact specific day and time, but it's going to happen like any day now. 12K will require a little bit more time. We're going to announce that in the upcoming video, the big announcement during the Crystal launch as well. So we're going to go more into the details about the development of the 12K. Of course, it's a very sophisticated technology. We're basically doing something that nobody else has done before by going basically 200 degrees horizontally with the field of view, and at the same time go with dual 6K panels and a lot of other sensors and features, eye tracking and stuff like that. So the development has been going on for more than 2 years, as far as I know. But we're still not completely finished with the 12K. Although the Crystal, I'm actually playing around with it now already. It's a great device. It's an in-house.
Like, can we see
Here
it?
we go.
Can we see
Well,
Yeah, I was
it?
gonna say, hang on, you can't just talk about it. What?
It's a pre-production device, so it's not from the production line yet. But that's I don't know how much I'm supposed to say right now, but it's here. And
Say it all.
This is one of those things where you ask for forgiveness later. That's just how it goes.
This one is, as you probably know if you've seen the videos in our presentations about the Crystal, this is a device which will not have as wide field of view as the Pimax 8KX, but it's going to provide a clarity which is just mind-blowing, which is the strength point of it, together with a lot of other technologies such as hand tracking, eye tracking, all that stuff. There's like a whole list of things, but the clarity, and also the panel technology, which is QLED with the local dimming, which adds so much more into the black levels. The panels are dimmable basically, so where it's supposed to be dark or black, it's going to be very black. It's almost basically OLED quality. Okay, sorry for making an advertisement of this now. I don't think that's what.
And do you have since someone is asking, do you have a price?
There's going to be, I can just hint you that there's going to be a little bit of a surprise when it comes to the Crystal. That's all I can say right now. Surprise. I mean, we have already an official price of the Crystal, and that we announced, like, what was it, like 4 months ago? And I think that price was right below $2,000 or $1,899, I think it was. But there might be some changes there. We'll see. That's just a small hint about it. but anyway, it's I cannot tell you too much because we want to save all the excitement and stuff for the official launch, where you actually can order these things and get them.
Fair enough.
Pretty soon. So
we have about 10 minutes. I'm going to try and go through as many questions as I can. Peter wants to know about eyeglasses, prescriptions, how do headsets work if you need glasses to see?
Well, here's the thing. With the 8KX, we never really did our own prescription lenses. We had like 3D printable inserts for prescription lenses, but we never really manufacture our own, even though that was a plan from the start. But it caused, yeah, we had some difficulties getting these out. But I know there are companies doing these. I can get back to that topic specifically in the blog post you mentioned earlier, and also I can also add that maybe to the presentation, because there are companies providing prescription lenses and prescription lens adapters for the Pimax 8KX, and there's going to be similar solutions for the Crystal as well, as far as I know. For the 12K, well, I hope so. It makes it way more difficult, all of that, because of the extremely wide field of view. So it's a way easier thing to add for the Crystal than for the 12K, but I'm 95% sure there's going to be solutions for that. But there might be a third-party partner who's doing these for us.
Anything else from anyone else there? Okay, so
I would
talking
just
about
say inserts.
sorry, yeah, of course that's what happens. Go ahead, Ben.
No, there's for most of the ones that I've found, there's inserts that you can purchase. So that's just a quick Google search, Pimax 8KX, a prescription insert, HP Reverb G2 insert. And there's a lot of people that make them. A lot of them are little 3D printed little clips that you can take to your eye doctor. They'll get you the lenses, they snap in.
Sure.
Most every headset that I've seen has some sort of it. You just have to be aware some headsets have a little bit more eye space. Some have a little bit less. So, your results may vary.
I want to talk about hardware settings. Lots of questions about this. We'll put some of this in the blog post, but just generally speaking, if people are wondering, is my computer good enough, or I'm not getting the performance that I want, can you guys just share your tips and tricks on that subject specifically?
Here's the thing: when it comes to video performance, it's all related to what you're trying to achieve. Just like we mentioned earlier, I mean, if you want the highest resolution and the highest graphical quality, level of detail, and all that, of course, that's going to require basically the best thing you can get, such as the RTX 4090 graphic card. It's quite an expensive hardware, but it's available now already since a week ago, or like 10-12 days ago. So yeah, that's what you're gonna need if you want to max out the settings with a high resolution headset such as 8KX or Crystal or 12K specifically. But you don't have to. That's the thing. You can customize it so much, and also all the things I mentioned or I showed that on the presentation in terms of optimizations, in terms of OpenXR implementations, which can reduce or offload the GPU and the CPU. That plays a big role here. So instead of going with an RTX 4090, you can probably get away with an RTX 3070 or 3080 or something like that. So estimating the average system requirement is really, really difficult when it comes to flight simulation. Not only because they're so different, all of those flight simulators, there are like tens of those. Then we have all these different headsets with the different resolutions, and then we have to take in account what settings you're going to run the thing at, what kind of refresh rate, how many frames per second are you aiming for. I know a lot of people are playing with the highest settings available with an RTX 3090 with the Pimax 8KX, and they get like 30-40 frames per second, and they're super happy with that and feel that it's smooth. But there are other people who can bump it up to 60 or 70 frames per second by just lowering some settings. So it's all very individual. It's really difficult to tell that. It's an answer I can maybe not fully. I mean, it's a question I can probably not fully answer. But there is a lot of help out there. For instance, like I told you before, I've been mentioning him a couple of times now, Steve, the VR flight sim guy, he's doing a lot of that stuff on his YouTube channel. There are so many other YouTube channels which are touching this topic when it comes to VR performance, how you can elaborate with settings, how you can adjust it, how you can gain 5 extra frames per second just by turning down the cloud setting, or those small things. If you add them up together, you can really gain some great performance lift.
Yeah, I was going to say on that real quick that it kind of comes down to spending some time, put your VR headset on, get into the sim, and start tuning it and find out find where smooth is. And once you find where smooth is, start bumping up things to make it graphically pleasing to you. If you can't bump them up to make them graphically pleasing to you, then this means you probably need to upgrade your hardware. Like, it's not the answer you want, but it's just the truth. I mean, VR is, it's top line technology. Pimax is, look what they're doing here. So you're going to need to most likely upgrade something if you're not getting the performance you want.
Yeah, it's not only that. Sorry for just squeezing in something here, but it's not only that. Even if you take VR away from the whole thing here, even if you're playing on a monitor, flight simulators in general are the most demanding things you can run on a PC when it comes to so-called gaming. I mean, compare that to any first-person shooter or anything. I mean, those games runs in 144, 200 frames per second with the latest generations of graphic cards. Meanwhile, Microsoft Flight Simulators still can struggle with on a 4K monitor, for instance. So it's not only about the VR headset itself; the simulators are demanding, and I think most people that are into flight simulations are already aware of the fact that you will need more than an average PC to run this thing. Yeah, sorry, go on, Ben. I know you were about to say something there.
No. I was always going to say is, so for the X-Plane users, run the demo. X-Plane has the free demo available on their website. Run the demo first. That'll immediately tell you, yeah, it performs well, it doesn't perform well. There's so many people that I've seen over the years that, they go, oh, I paid all this money, I bought this headset, bought all this stuff, and then they didn't even bother with the free demo. Use the free demo. It's there.
Yeah.
And one last question that everyone can kind of just share a little bit on is with respect to managing the fact that when you're in a VR headset, you can't see. So how do you deal with the fact that you might have a joystick that you can't see, or you want to deal with a physical device on your desk? What solutions are out there, from pass-through video to maybe trying to place items in the virtual world, or anything else that you've seen?
Well, I would say for me personally, I wouldn't see that as a problem, because I mean, seriously, how often do you look at a joystick or your yoke, really? I mean, most of the time you get used to the buttons where they are located, and it's kind of like a natural thing that you know exactly where to push and how to handle all these things. Having that said, there are technologies coming, specifically with our next generation headset. There is going to be add-ons you can buy, basically like a front faceplate on the headset. So instead of having, for instance, on the Crystal, instead of having the front plate like this with just a LED bar, you can add a front with two cameras, see-through cameras, so that you can potentially see your desktop, or I mean your keyboard or whatever you're having on your desk. Meanwhile, seeing the simulator itself, and if you look ahead of you. But on the other hand, that also needs support by the developers of the flight simulator, which is also something we hope we can get them on the train, to fix that. There are companies. I visited a military defense complex in the United States. That was more than 2 years ago. I don't know if I'm able to even say who that was, but it's a very big military defense company, and they have solutions for this kind of stuff, like with dual see-through cameras. They're using green screens. You're sitting basically in a real helicopter. You see the entire cockpit of the helicopter, but outside of the helicopter, there's a 3D world, a VR world in 3D. So you're using a headset. You see what's happening outside. There's basically a war outside of that helicopter, but inside you're still pushing. You're still seeing your hands, the buttons, and all that stuff. And there are also VR manufacturers such as Xtal who is doing these solutions for the military as well. Although it's rather a costly solution at this point. I think their solution is like $300,000 for something, for a full cockpit, including the headset and stuff like that. So maybe that's nothing for the regular flight sim enthusiast. But I think technology will evolve pretty fast from now on. So with the see-through technology we're going to have on both the Pimax Crystal and the 12K, I think we're going to see some solutions for this with flight simulators as well.
Perfect. I think that's about all the time we have. So quick wrap-up thoughts if anyone wants to contribute anything, and then we'll wrap up for today. And I'll talk about where people, if they have more questions, can get those answered. Want to start with Wojciech?
Sure.
Wojciech, you want to start?
Well, The flight simulation is, what I can observe, it will grow for sure. I had a test of our simulator with the pilots, and they are really looking forward for it. So I think that we are just on the beginning, and it will develop for sure very rapidly, and it will be very, very useful for pilots with the all skills, all levels. Yeah, the
Perfect.
technology came, and it will develop for sure.
Blue, anything for you as we wrap up?
I was gonna say I'm just really thankful to be a part of this, and also just to be a part of this VR flight simulation and simulation in general. It's been a big difference. I put off getting into it for a long time. I was like, oh, I want to get into VR, but I was like, I don't know if I should do it. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to me on that. Where it's like you see VR, you see videos of people flying or doing anything in VR, like that looks really cool. Like I want to try it. And I was like that. That was me for a while. Like I put it off for a couple of years. Like, yeah, I should go and invest the money into getting VR or getting a PC that can run VR. And I finally did it, and I'm so glad I did. I'll never go back. I mean, I'm not saying I don't ever fly 2D. I mainly fly 2D, but I really enjoy flying in VR. It's big for me. I'm using it for training for myself for my pilot training. I try to go out in a little Cessna or a Piper and do circuits and things like that to get familiar with kind of like the movements of flying a real aircraft, and that's kind of my take on it. But it's also fun in general. I mean, even for my family, we play Beat Saber and stuff like that. It's just in general, it's a fun platform to game on. So yeah, I enjoy it. I'm glad to be here.
Ben, over to you.
Yeah, so no, I appreciate the conversations. I've been using VR exclusively for years. I'll kind of sign off real quick. I'll be on the Discord if you guys need me. And then shout out to Flight Sim Coach if you guys do want, dedicated support. There is a Flight Sim Coach, comes through the FSA Captains program. So if you guys do need that, let me know. But other than that, I'm good for that. I'll just kind of answer on Discord. You can at me if I don't get to you.
Perfect. And Martin.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to say thank you once again for inviting me. Thank you to the Flight Simulation Association and to you, Even. It really is a blast to be here together with you, also with you, Ben, with Blue and Wojciech and all of you out there. It's been a pleasure to just, reflect all these things and talk together. And it's easy to tell that we're actually all agreeing on something. We do all agree on one thing, and that VR does change flight simulation completely. And to all of you out there in our audience, which are looking at this, watching this now, or maybe watching this tomorrow or something, just one tip: don't be afraid of trying out VR. You might have heard a lot of things about VR being difficult, about being limited, about being expensive and all that. But trust me, try it, and you will get blown away for sure. And flight simulation is just like made for VR. And that's, once you go there, you never look back again. So that's my pro tip, so to say. It's really something amazing. And the community for VR flight enthusiasts is just constantly growing, and that's for a reason, I think.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys very much again for the wonderful presentation. Obviously, with all the questions and the chat, we'll have to have you back because it seems like we could go on for another hour and a half if we wanted to. Now, if you do have more questions, right over here, I'm just dragging onto the screen. This is Discord, and Ben, who you just saw on the screen, is there, and he's happy to answer more of your questions via text. You can do that through the webinar page, but once that closes down, you'll need to actually be part of our Discord to access that. But it is totally free if you're a member, so you can join in and keep asking him questions if you have more questions. And like I said, I'm going to work with Pimax. I know we had a bunch of questions about VR technology when it comes to what simulator setting should I pick. So we'll work on giving a nice resource, a blog post for people as a follow-on for today's session. Now, coming up next with us is on November 12th. We're doing another webinar that's more of this panel style. Some of these webinars we tend to do with just one expert where they're like super focused and it's like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Ones like today are a little bit more open. We get a few different people involved, and that's what we have have coming up next on November 12th. We're looking all at media in flight simulation. So content creators, news websites, asking questions like, how are they paid? Are they paid by developers? Does that make the stuff they do maybe a little bit less objective? And so we'll be talking about all those things. We did the rehearsal for that earlier today. It was phenomenal. We had lots of fun talking with Fabio, the Two-Tone Murphy, Sky Command, MSFS add-ons, and FS Delete. So join us on November 12th. And yes, there will be lots more opportunity to win. Once again, a big thank you to our panelists, to Pimax for helping to do this with us, and to all of you in the chat for watching and for the great questions. That's all from us. Safe travels, blue skies. Thanks, everybody.